Hello, Benjamin. Trying to get the streaming thing right before class starts now. See if I figured it out correctly. All right, people on the stream should be hearing me now. Let me know if you're not hearing me. We got 3 people on the stream, it looks like. All right, thanks, Hepa. I see you posted hearing me. All right. So there's a possibility we might have another person arrive because Martin's not here yet, but we'll go ahead and get started. Excellent. So it looks like maybe I figured out this streaming stuff, or at least for this class. All right. So this class is about 3D modeling, and it's going to build on what you learned in the previous classes. In fact, I saw what Danny posted, the video of the space that he was creating. I was pretty impressed with the staircase work. And I think that you may even scream at me when I show you some of the tools that you're going to learn in tonight's class, because it's going to make that a lot easier. Because, as you remember, working in Unity, we were trying to use Unity primitives and rotate and scale them, maybe even group them. But what we're going to get into tonight is some 3D modeling tools that you can actually get access to inside of Unity. But just to start off with, let's talk about a little bit about what a 3D artist does and how they do it. So you might have heard of tools like Blender or Maya or 3ds Max or ZBrush. And those are some of the software tools that professional 3D modelers will often use in a video game studio. Blender is actually free, and you can download it, and it's super powerful. People have made movies with it and done professional effects. But those are super complicated tools. I have an intro class for Blender in particular, but it can take a lot of time to get used to. But the things I'm going to teach you tonight are going to use a lot of the same principles, a lot of the same basics that these tools use. And so, you can think of tonight's class as kind of easing you into understanding what it's like to work with 3D modeling. It's a great way to get started without jumping in with too much complexity. But you can make characters, you can make props, you can make interior environments and exterior environments. You do this by modeling, which is, like forming the shapes. You can almost think of it as like digital clay in a way. But you also add textures to give the look, which is not just the color, it's also the patterns, it's the way light affects the surface of the 3D model. Things like shading, which affect that as well. In 3D modeling, a lot of times you're working with lighting, even if you aren't necessarily lighting the model, even if you're not adding the lighting to the model to bring it into 3D, you want to be conscious of how light affects the model, because that's a big thing to do with 3D. Rigging is how a character has their bones set up, the skeleton inside a character that allows you to animate them, and even props that move will have rigging. And animation, of course, which, that's in bigger game studios, animation is a specialization all its own. You could focus on just learning how to animate, and that's actually like one of the most sought after positions in a video game, a AAA company, because there's a lot of animation to do, and there's not a lot of skilled people to do it. And then rendering is the process of making it look good. Now that could be rendering an image for a movie, or it could be like how the 3D editor like Unity actually gets the finished product, things like post-processing to tint and make changes. Compositing is mixing all these things together. So let's see. In my presentation is now stuck. Oh, nope, it's not. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what we're gonna do in this class. So these are some screenshots from an older version of ProBuilder. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating some basic 3D objects in Unity using ProBuilder. We're going to do a little vertex coloring, which means we're going to add color to our models by selecting different parts of them and just applying a procedural color to them, which is an easy way to quickly create like, we talked about a gray box level and how you might use color to highlight certain parts. You don't have to bother with texturing if you just want simple colors applied to your 3D model. You can use vertex coloring. We'll talk a little bit about materials and textures. That's at the later part of the presentation, or rather the class. So if we get to that. UV maps are how a texture gets applied to a 3D model. We'll talk about that a little bit. So let's go ahead and start out by creating a new project. So I'm gonna do this along with you. Let's see, so I'll go ahead and move this out of the way, or I'll leave it up there for now. But what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna, in the Unity Hub, click New Project. You're gonna wanna choose your most recent version of Unity. If you have multiple versions, you may just have one. Just like in the previous class, we're gonna create a universal 3D project. So you need to either have all or core selected to see this. And then all we do is, we can say like, class 3, whatever you like. If you want to call it, 3D modeling, or class 3. And then just note where you saved it and hit create project. And just like before, it takes a little bit of time for Unity to get even an empty project set up. So let's see, while we're waiting on that, let's see if I have some things. Oh yeah, so let's talk a little bit. We've already talked a bit about, hey, how's it going? So this is a screenshot from like the older version of ProBuilder, and there's some distinctions that I'm going to show. I've updated most of this slideshow, but so one of the things that we're going to do is something to know about ProBuilder is that ProBuilder used to be a tool that somebody else created that you would have to buy and then import the package into Unity. But Unity found that what they made was so useful that Unity bought the tool and now makes it freely available inside of Unity. So the thing is that there's actually a lot of different packages like this, a lot of different tools that you get for free with Unity, but they're not in the engine when you first create an empty project. You have to import them as a package into your project. So let's see. Excellent. Cool. So mine's at like the 50% mark, but it speeds up a lot after that. Let's see. But if anybody had any questions about the previous class, you can ask them now while we're waiting. I'll also look in the chat, whether it's the chat for the stream or the chat for the Discord. Anybody have experience modeling 3D objects before? Different software? Which software did you use, Jesse? Uh-huh. So did you use CAD? Mm-hmm.
More advanced than Autodesk.
Oh, interesting. Oh, wow. So Jessie mentioned that she has experience working with kind of mechanical engineering 3D programs, which of course are super precise and pretty highly complicated. So like, yeah, the games, the 3D modeling programs that are often used for games aren't near that same level of like ultra precision, because you don't need ultra high precision in a video game. But they're still significantly complex, although there's some really interesting programs, like for example, what I'm going to show you is the kind of stuff that tends to make more like what they call hard surface 3D. Like it's an approach where you're making like maybe buildings or vehicles or weapons or those kind of things. Whereas like the really organic shapes, there's different approaches, kind of like the approach that like ZBrush uses. There's a program for iPad called Nomad Sculpt, and that's more like sculpting with digital clay. Blender has a mode that does that, but it's a really different approach. So what I'm going to show you today is more of a approach I learned way back in school. Let's see. So Christian says you tried some Blender when the Dota workshop was blowing up. Quickly realized I didn't know what I was doing. Tried to craft some simple weapons. Yes, Blender is very, very daunting to get started with. Actually, there's just so many shortcuts and so many tools, and you press a button and the whole thing changes and you have no idea what you just did. But the thing is that what we're going to do is going to use a lot of the exact same fundamental principles, but with like a fraction of the complexity, and it's all in Unity, so you can immediately use it in your game. So hopefully you're like me and you're getting close to the point of having an empty scene here. And so you can see that in the inspector, we have this empty template. We can remove that, these assets, because we don't really need them. It's just kind of a notification. The other thing that we don't really need now is we don't need to worry about this global volume. We can delete it. We don't really need a camera at this point, and we don't need a directional light. Although you're like, well, you might say, well, Brian, without the directional light, the scene looks really dark. And there's the reason for that is that there's different view modes for our scene. And our toolbar of toolbars over here has this thing right here that says draw modes. If we click on it, you'll see that these are different ways of looking at this scene and the objects in our scene. And the one that's currently selected is shaded draw mode. That essentially, it's going to show you how the scene looks with lighting. But if we move over to the unlit draw mode, then we get this. And for right now, we just want something nice and simple, easy to manage. We don't need those extra bits and pieces. So go ahead and, oh, Danny says he used AutoCAD in high school, but you can't pretend you remember much. Yeah, I actually, I learned, in college I learned 3ds Max and Maya, but I don't remember much of them either because I haven't used them in a very long time. I've been trying to learn Blender because it's free. Those other programs are super expensive. But some of the free tools are just as good as paid tools. So Martin, I imagine you're still getting caught up, is that right? So we just need an empty 3D project. Are you in a position to get there? I see you got a mouse this time too. Excellent. All right, so click, I mean, actually, what you can do is you can go back to your projects and just click up, open the last one we did. Technically, and it'll probably open up faster. And then all you'll need to do is create a new scene.
New scene.
Yeah, so I'll show you up here on the, so yeah, something I probably could have told you to do that I only realized now in retrospect was that, you could have opened the previous project and to get a clean slate like this, you just would do File, New Scene, and you'd get something like this, and you could take a basic URP scene and then say Create. And then you could delete the main camera and the directional light. Because that just gives us an empty scene with nothing in it. So what we're going to do next is we're going to import the ProBuilder package. So that's something that we can find in what's called the package manager. The package manager you've already used to bring in the third-person controller and the first-person controller. And the way that you get access to the package manager is you can click Window, Package Management, Package Manager. It's so commonly used, I think it's even something that you can get up here under, I think it's actually here. Yeah. So if you want to short, now that the latest version of Unity actually gives you a shortcut to it right here. So you'll note that, okay, there's There's packages that are in your project. That's what's currently selected. So these are the things that are the packages that are already in an empty Unity project. But what we want to do is we want to go to Unity Registry. These are where all of the free packages that are part of Unity are kept. And you can see there's lots of cool stuff in here that you might eventually want to explore. And just go ahead and scroll and see how much stuff is here. But if we scroll down past the M's to where you see the P's, you get to ProBuilder, in between post-processing and profile analyzer. So ProBuilder, once you have it selected, over here on the right side, you can click Install. And it'll take a sec to import it. It doesn't have any assets, so you won't see that window that popped up before with like, you know, to tell you what it's actually importing, because it's really just code. So what you first want to do is go to File, New Scene, to give yourself a new scene and do a basic URP. And that just gives you a nice empty space. You can delete this and this. And now you have your package manager here. Wow, your screen is pretty dark, yeah. Yeah, if it's plugged in, you might be able to increase that. There you go. So now if you go to Unity Registry and you scroll all the way down here to ProBuilder. Yep, and it's right there. Now click Install. Yeah. Awesome. So you might get this notification to reload the scene. That's cool. And I don't know why I got that warning. That's kind of weird. Sometimes you might get these warnings and they look kind of scary, but if you click clear and they go away, then chances are it wasn't that big of a deal. If that red error doesn't go away, then it might be something you have to resolve. Now you're going to tell me like, oh wait, so I imported ProBuilder and it looks the same. So where is it? Unity's done a pretty good job of hiding ProBuilder, and it integrates into the tools that are already there, but it's a little hidden. So if you go to Tools, well, for one thing, this Tools menu didn't exist before. It does now, and it's got a ProBuilder menu. And you can see that there's editors and all these other things. There used to be, ProBuilder used to have its own window, its own kind of inspector that you would dock into here. But what they did along the way was they said, why don't we just build it into the things that are already there in Unity instead of making it separate? So for example, to get started with what we're going to do today, in your hierarchy, you might remember you can either click in the game object menu or you can right click here in the hierarchy. And that's where we got access to all these different 3D objects that we used previously. Well, now if we go further down, you'll see there's a ProBuilder menu, and it's got some of the same 3D objects like a cone or a cylinder, but it's also got stairs. And you can do, you can actually, do different things with these stairs. So yeah, Danny is probably screaming at this point because like you put all that effort into making stairs, and what do you know, ProBuilder can create some stairs for you right away. But let's go to ProBuilder, and you can note some of that it has more options, torus, prism stuff. But let's start out with an ordinary cube. And we can just click here, and here's our cube. So we have a cube, and if you look over here in the inspector, there's this thing that says ProBuilder Mesh Filter, and you can actually change the size. Actually, this is read-only, but there's ways to edit the shape and change the size. But let me not get ahead of myself. One of the things that you might also note is that, wait a minute, like now that we have a ProBuilder cube out here, this orange thing appeared, and this edit shape thing appeared. And there's some other things that weren't here before. Those are ProBuilder specific tools that they've started to integrate into the UI. So for example, with the cube selected, if I click edit shape, here I get this thing that says shape settings, and here I can actually change some of like the procedural shape settings, like some of the basic parameters before you start making changes to the object. Ah, okay, Jesse, you don't see the extra UI. That's quite probably, I suspect this is what the case is. Now, if you look at your toolbar of toolbars, and if you turn everything off, then you might see this. Do you see this thing here, the toolbar of toolbars? Mm-hmm. Because that can also disappear. And that could be really confusing if you accidentally hide this. Now you have no tools and you're like, ah! I had to actually do a little research to discover there's a way to get that back. You can click this dot, 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 click overlay menu, and then here's all your toolbars, and that's the toolbar of toolbar down here. And I click offside. But let's start bringing back the missing toolbar. So the very first one at the top is where all your transform tools are. When I turn this on, I get all of these, which includes move, rotate, scale, create cube, create poly shape. These are the ProBuilder specific things here. Do you see that? Mm-hmm. So if you click this top one, you get this toolbar. And it can be useful to kind of simplify it down. The other thing that's going to come in handy is this tool settings bar. So what I recommend is go ahead and turn off everything except for those top two, so that we're on the same page. So now if you click your cube, you should see this extra orange tool here. You should see edit shape here. You see those? So that's when you have the cube selected. So if you click the first one, oh yeah, click, oh, you can drag that up there. Yeah, there you go. And so now you have those two. Now if you click cube, now you see that one and you see those.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. All right, so make sure, yeah. Hmm? Oh, so right click here, and then go down to ProBuilder and click cube. Mm-hmm. And then you can just hit enter because it's okay to have it named cube. Now with it selected, okay, let's see your, just to make it look like everything else, let's remove those two. Let's take this and put it up here. And we'll put this here and actually go vertical. And that'll just help us make it look. So now yours should look like mine, especially if you click cube. Mm-hmm. All right. So we have this cube. We saw that if we click edit shape, you can go ahead and make it like, 2 times as long on the, not 21, 2. You can actually change its shape here before you start modifying it if you want to. Like if you're the kind of person that likes to have numbers and have things like tightly on the grid, then you can totally do that there. And so that's a way that you can change the shape, and you see it kind of reflected over here as well. So you can go ahead and make your cube whatever shape you'd like. And remember that you should always, when 3D modeling or working with 3D at all, do things like hold down the left Alt button and left click and drag to pan around something like this. You can use the middle mouse scroll button to zoom in and out. How do I pan like this? Oh, that's by click and hold the middle mouse button. Now, hopefully that works for you on Mac. Yeah. And then if you and as a reminder too, you have these things up here. If you want to move the object in 3D space, to rotate it, or to scale it. So this, you'll note that this ProBuilder cube on the surface seems like it's like a lot like a regular Unity cube. In fact, I'll even go here and bring out a Unity cube. So this one is just a regular old Unity cube. You'll notice that the ProBuilder cube comes with this interesting texture on it that as you make it bigger or smaller, like if I edit the shape and I make this 2, you can see that when I stretch it out that the texture doesn't stretch. Instead, you know, it actually kind of like duplicates out so that you can see that like each one of these squares here is a unit. So it's easy to look at this ProBuilder cube and see that it's 2 units in the X direction, 1 unit in Y, and 1 unit in Z. And that the Unity cube doesn't have anything like that. It's different. It doesn't have that texture. You could technically set up the Unity cube to do that. But let's get into the interesting stuff. And actually, let me hop back over here and just make sure that I'm following along with my presentation. So we talked a bit about getting the package manager. We talked about where the ProBuilder menu is. You know, we added a cube and we saw that these new controls appeared. And then we said, holy crap, sometimes you can lose, you know, your toolbar or toolbars. This is the way to get it back. We talked about modifying the object size. Now we're going to talk about some of the 3 fundamentals of 3D modeling. You see, 3D models are made up of 3 different aspects: vertices, edges, and faces. So, and vertices are the points that make up a 3D object. The edges are the lines that are in between them, and a face is the entire space within a set. And so let's give that a try. All right, so this is something that the Unity cube can't do. So what we want to do is we want to get to the point where we can actually edit these faces. And so let's see if I remember correctly how to do this. That's right. So we need this thing up, and then we need, aha, that's it. So see, it's even so well hidden. I've done this, this is like my 3rd time doing this and I still forget. The way that you get access to being able to manipulate vertices, edges, and faces is that when you have this cube selected, you click on this orange tool that's at the beginning of the tool panel. So it says, this tool context determines what move, rotate, and scale, do, and modify. If I click on this, you'll see that now these things appear in this toolbar. So the tool settings toolbar used to be just pivot and global, but now it has these other things. It has vertex selection, edge selection, face selection, select hidden elements, and other stuff. But the most important thing are these 3 things here. So make sure that you have clicked this thing, the orange grid, while you have your cube selected, and that if you have your tool settings panel open, you should see these. They could be kind of hidden like this. So beware of that. You know, if you need to, you can open this up so that you can see them. Or if you find that tool panel is getting hidden too much, you could even pull it down here to where you have an easier access to it. So that's not a bad idea, considering things are starting to get a little crowded up there on this toolbar. And I get freaked out by seeing red in the console. So you'll note that this tool settings, it already has face selection selected because it's blue. And if you mouse over these faces, they kind of tint. If you click on one, it turns a darker yellow. And you can see if you have the move tool selected, you can pull this up and down. This is not the same as scaling in that direction. You're actually taking that face and pulling it upward. And you can do that here as well. And you see that that texture will expand and duplicate itself to show you how much space you're using. So that's a face. Now try clicking this one that says edge selection. And so now if you click on an edge, you can manipulate just this edge. So now if you look at what I've done something that you can't do with just scaling and rotating and moving an ordinary Unity cube. So we've actually like adjusted and kind of started to create our own 3D object based on pulling edges out. So grab a couple edges and just pull them out to see what happens. You can always Control Z if you want to go back to something previous. So feel free to experiment with this. Now, and remember that it's really smart to always kind of like pan around what you are making in 3D because it might look okay from one direction and look totally wrong from the other. So that's something that is really good to get used to. Now, something that you can, I have the move tool selected and I can move this edge, or I can switch to a face and I can move this face. You can also click on the vertex selection, and then you can click on one of these points in a corner and move just it. You can see sometimes this produces something kind of wonky looking, a little bulgy, because you're kind of like making that face look a little unusual. But so you can switch between moving with, moving an edge, moving a face, moving just a vertex. You can hold down Control and select multiple vertices. And the other thing that you can do, with a, when you're in one of these modes, you can move, but you can also rotate. That's not going to do anything. This will. You can also scale. So all of your normal transform controls, move, rotate, and scale, now work on faces, edges, and vertices. So if I select a face and I want to rotate the entire face, I can do that. I can pull it up. I can rotate it. I could scale it. I can even scale on just one axis. And it might be easier or harder to get the shape that you want based on using one of those approaches. So I'm Control-Zing back to something closer resembling now the thing that is super important, super useful is what I call doodling, which is like, maybe you got to the point where you had something that looked really, really mangled, and you're just like, all right, this is a hot mess. You can just like delete it, bring out a new cube, or whatever you want to work with, and try again. Like, it's more important for you to just kind of experiment, get the feel of things, make a mess, throw the mess away, try again. I used to, when I was in college, I was trying to learn 3D Studio Max, and I would go into the computer lab at the university, which had rows and rows of computers, and I would play around on 3D Studio Max until I got to the point where I had broken something and didn't understand how to fix it. So I would just log off that computer and then go to the next computer and start it up, and I pretty much broke 3D Studio Max on every one of the computers, but I learned really quickly. And I really recommend that it's way more valuable if you just take the time to get used to how things work and, experiment, see what you can do. Now, one thing you might have noticed is that, like, okay, maybe you rotated something and now you want to move it, but you're like, well, wait, I want to move it like kind of straight out in that direction that face is pointing. I don't want to, if I were to try to do that here, I'd have to kind of pull it a little awkward and unsteadily. You're like, well, why can't I get this thing to point in the direction that the face is going? You can actually do that. And that's the difference between local and global and element. So, we played a little bit with the difference between global and local, and that still applies here when we're talking about faces. So if I were to switch to element, now you see that this gizmo is now pointing in the direction that the face is pointing in. So the difference between this and this can be really useful sometimes, particularly when you want to constrain to just one direction. Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, actually, here it'll actually make even more sense when I show you this next piece. So what I'm going to do is, so what we've done is we've been able to manipulate vertexes, faces, and edges. Yeah, Benjamin? Yeah, element is what, oh, so you can switch between global and element. So if you switch between, local and global in this context do pretty much the same thing. But when you switch to element, now you're like, I don't know, that doesn't seem terribly useful to me, Brian. Well, let's take another step. Let's say that we're starting to, make the shoulder or arm of a character. Like there's, as I mentioned, the things that you learn here are kind of universal to all 3D programs. One of the other things that's a very common thing that you do in 3D modeling is something called extruding. And these tools are something that are in ProBuilder here. And if I right click on this face, you see I have a face selected, and when I right click, there's all these other tools here that are 3D tools. Bevel, triangulate, subdivide, flipping faces, detaching faces. It's funny that they actually put the #1 most useful thing that you will do over and over again at the very bottom, which is extruding a face. This is what happens when you extrude a face. So you see that it extruded out, it went from there to there. So it added, and this isn't just kind of stretching, this is adding more geometry. And it's really smart to create a 3D model by starting with the simplest thing you can and kind of adding the complexity slowly as you build out. So, but here's an example of why we might care about the difference between global and element, which is that, let's say that I want this to stretch out straight out from where this face is. I mean, I can't, if I do, let me do this. Let me snap to one of the sides. So if I were to do this, I'm like, well, that's not what I want. I could do something like this, but it's imprecise. But if I set it to element, now I can constrain it to just this axis and go directly out. So you can imagine, using a series of extrusions like this to build a character, for example. Like if I were to go back to this, and I was to say, okay, well, let me imagine that this is a character. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to make, the body of my character. And then if I extrude up a section here, now this is a separate face from this. I can use this to make an arm. I can extrude that out into an arm. I can select this and extrude that out into an arm. And now I can take this and I can extrude that up into a head. So now then I'm like, okay, well, that looks like a cross, not like a person, but you can keep doing this. You can start to extrude. You might take parts and rotate them. So I can, for example, here's something. Like, let's say that I wanted to, well, I mean, technically, I can take this and I can rotate it like this. And I can start to create like a shoulder. Maybe I want to go back to global for this and move this over here. And then I would extrude this out again. But then let's say, okay, this is all too far away. What if I want to just take all of this here and scoot it back? Well, maybe if I switch to vertex selection and highlight all these vertices, and then make them go back. Well, look, I've started to kind of mangle some stuff over here. Like, well, wait, I got this one, I got these, but I didn't get these when I selected. Like, why didn't selecting like this get these guys on the back side? And that's actually an option that gets set in the tool. Let's see. Yep, I think that's this thing. Hidden element selection. So now if I select, I'm getting the stuff on the back side as well. So now I can go into this kind of, this side view and start to say, I want to position these things a little bit better. I want to bring this up here. Maybe I want to bring those down a little bit. And as I pan around, I see it's affecting the ones on the back as well as the ones on the front. You know, pop back to this view, maybe bring this up here. So it's very normal and natural to be like adjusting your 3D model bit by bit to kind of massage things. It's like a sculptor who's either like adding clay or subtracting clay to gradually get what you're looking for. So that's something that I want you to spend a little bit of time practicing. So let's recap a little of what we've seen here. So we talked a little bit about vertex selection. You know, vertices are these points in the corners. Edge selection, edge connects vertices. Face selection, a face is everything in between, you know, four vertices. We talked about, you know, this cool texture that comes on ProBuilder things that can help you estimate size based on the units. We talked about, you know, the difference between global and element. When it comes, it's essentially like global and local. It changes your tools to determine how they orient themselves compared to the thing you have selected. We extruded face. I also encourage you to try some of these others, like beveling edges, triangulating faces. And we noted that we can use the same tools in addition to moving faces, edges, and vertices. We can scale them and we can rotate them. So what I want you to do, well, here's a couple of tips. You know, I mentioned that you can use Shift or Control to select or deselect multiple edges, faces, vertices. You can click and drag over an area to select several things, although we noted that there's that Select Hidden button that you need to turn on if you want the things in the back. Because there's times when you don't want the things in the back, and there's times when you do. So as a reminder, that is this thing here in the tool settings. Right next to vertex, edge, and face selection, you can turn on and turn off the ability to select things behind something else. Yeah, it's something that I showed you previously that you've seen me doing here a little bit is using this widget here. So switch from perspective to isometric, especially in isometric, popping to different sides to be able to look at things from different angles. Super useful. But then you should always go back to kind of looking all around it. Hey, it looks kind of like I'm making a hammer now, actually. Let's see. Like one of those claw hammers. Bang, bang. Mouse over tool in ProBuilder window to see what it does. So yeah, there are some of these tooltips that kind of will tell you what things do. So now what I want you to do is spend a little time just to get comfortable and acclimate to this. I'll come around if there's anything you're having trouble with and need to catch up. But essentially kind of try to think of an object that you'd like to create, something simple I recommend at the beginning, something more hard surface than organic. It helps to get some reference. So just get a picture of something just to help you get it in your mind. Start from a shape that's close to that thing, whether it's like a cube or a cylinder or whatever. use vertex, edge, and face selection, as well as rotate, scale, and move, and then use extrude faces and bevel, and make adjustments until you have a rough approximation. So here, let me show you bevel. So if I click on selecting a face and select this face, bevel is like both extruding and scaling at the same time, in a way. So actually, you know, when something is beveled, it tends to mean that like you go around it, kind of dividing it, making a nice kind of. So you can see that. Let's see. So here's before, and here's after. So this was a bevel. And you see, each one of these is a face, which means each one of these things can be manipulated, you know, in different ways. You know, I could rotate that and then, you know, bring it out. But you'll, you know, make sure you look around and see like, okay, well, what that did was it did this operation on all four sides. In a way, if you were to extrude and then scale this, you'd have something much like a bevel. Cool. So give this a shot and raise your hand if you have any questions. We'll do this for like at least 10 minutes up to like the midpoint break, since it's like at 6:20. I'll try to keep an eye on the chat to see if there's any questions there as well. Glad you're being illuminated, Christian. All right. If you're in the class and you need some help, just raise your hand and come by. Or otherwise paste in the chat. Yeah, Martin, what can I help you with?
Yeah, just not on the same page here as that, but it's a cube still. Very lush thing here.
Yeah, it looks like you use the regular scaling tools to scale it. Which you can totally do. You can use regular tools, but if you want the ProBuilder tools, if you want to be doing things like stretching the faces, then what I would do is go, you might want to either undo, like hit Control-Z until you get back to the original cube. Yeah, keep trying. Well, so what I would say is maybe just delete this cube and let's start with a fresh one. So to select your cube in the hierarchy there. And then delete it. There you go. Now right click in the hierarchy. No, in the middle. Just anywhere in that open space in the hierarchy. Yeah. So now if you go down to ProBuilder and then click cube, third one from the top. So now you have that cube there. Well, don't go ahead and stretch it out just yet. Control-Z to undo that.
Yeah. So
now what you've got is you got the cube. And you have one of your tools. Let's see, where'd all your tools go? Strange. Yeah, you have an unusual tool selected, but it looks like it's kind of like your UI is stuck. Let's see if resetting your layout helps. There we go. Now let's see. All right, so this we're going to put up. We're going to take this. I'm going to put it up here because those are very commonly used tools. And then let's see, we'll bring this down here because pretty soon, let's see, so now if we open that up, okay, now, so now if you click on cube there, now if you click on the orange thing there, yep.
What can I do?
Well, let's see. Can I try or let's see. I think maybe it's here. No. So it should actually be in these tool settings there it is. Yeah. I think your computer might be struggling to run Unity just a little bit, or it's just being unusually laggy. So you might need to have a little bit of patience with it.
Yeah.
So now you have this face thing selected. Now you can select the different faces. So now if you were to you see how now when you pull it out, you're not stretching the texture. It's almost like the texture stays and it expands as it. So give it a shot now, like try to drag one of those faces. You can click on any of the faces. So now you're taking that face and moving it upward. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So now try switching to edge. Yeah, click there. Mm-hmm. So now it automatically selects the edges that were around that face. If you click off, left click. Now click, say, right there. So there you go. Now try to move that edge. So you have an edge selected.
Yes, the mouse.
Oh, it looks like you got an edge on the back side. Yeah, try highlighting the one that's right there. Yeah, try to highlight that one and see if you can get it. Click. Yeah, there you go. Now click the blue thing. Oh, click. There you go.
I want to.
Yeah, it looks like you got the one on the back side. Curious. Try clicking up here. There you go. Now click the blue arrow and pull. There you go. So now you're manipulating an edge. So you can click any of those edges and you can, move or drag them. So yeah, now you actually had your fingers on the gizmo there.
Yeah.
So sometimes it can be hard to tell when you have an edge selected. You see the gizmo, if you drag on this, it'll move.
Is maybe a stupid question, but what's that exactly?
So the gizmo is this thing that is green, red, and blue. So this is a move gizmo. Okay. Now if you click this, you get the rotate gizmo. So these gizmos are kind of like, they show you what the tool does and they let you grab, like, so here, this is the scale gizmo, which is going to look pretty crazy. And so now, let's see, with this thing selected, you can click here to do the vertexes, which are these points. And so if you switch to the move tool, you can move an individual point around. Yep. Exactly. So yeah, just get the hang of selecting and moving around edges, vertexes, and faces. And that's a good way to focus. Yeah, Jesse.
I made one, but
oh yeah, your cylinder has got a whole lot of sides.
Is this one the one?
Well, so in order to make changes to the original, then you'd have to reset it. Yeah. But then, so right now, your sides is so high.
But
if you make it low,
it's another round.
Exactly. So you kind of have to find the sweet spot. So what Jesse's experiencing is that to get something with smooth edges, you want to find the least number of faces that you can use, and it still looks okay. Because when you increase the number of sides or the amount of geometry, the number of faces, the number of vertices, and etc., it becomes very difficult to make changes. So and it also makes it very heavy to process, like the computer. So you want to find the least number of sides that will give you the look that you want.
But it's still difficult to choose one surface on the top, because it's still like 20 around.
Oh yeah. Well, there's a trick for that too, which I'll show you. So for example,
make like some surface around.
Well, here, let me show everyone a little bit of what Jesse's going through, which is the. Yeah. So Jesse decided to explore using a cylinder, and one of the things that she discovered was that when you first get a cylinder, it doesn't look like a circle very much. It looks like a octagon, but you can increase the number of sides, and you're like, wow, I can increase it really high. I can make it all the way 640. Like, ooh, that's super smooth. But then when you start trying to edit this, there's so much complexity, it becomes very hard to do so. So one of the things that you want to do is you always want to keep it as lightweight as you possibly can, both for like that's called keeping the poly count down, and that will make it easier on your computer to deal with it, and it'll make it easier on you to edit it. Now, Jesse, you said that, like, well, even at a lower number of sides, that you were seeing that, like, okay, well, if you wanted to select, the top, that's a lot of faces to select, right? Well, there's a trick, which is like if you select this vertex in the center, and then you switch to the face selection, well, what it should have done is it should have selected all the faces up there. But that's what a lot of powerful 3D programs do. But there are other tricks that we can use. So for example, we can select, we can kind of, remember that if we do this, okay, I do have the back selection. So I've selected too much, but I think I can subtract from the selection like this. Yeah. So, okay, let me recap what I did. So what I did was, I'm like, okay, well, I can area select. And, I could try to, with face selected, if I just want the faces on the top, looking at it from the side, I can area select like this. And I get the faces on the top, but I get a bunch of faces that I don't want as well. But I can, just like you can hold down Control and click to add faces, you can also hold down Control and remove faces from a selection. So if I hold down Control and do an area select here, I'm saying remove those faces from the selection. So, and so like if I click here and I hold Control, I can click, click, click to add, or I can click, click, click to remove. So adding and removing from a selection is a way you can kind of get what you want. Sometimes you're trying to figure out clever ways of doing this. A lot of times, so if I have a face selected and I switch to the vertex selection, it automatically selects the 4 vertexes that made up that face. And that's what I was kind of hoping for here, is that if I switch to face, it would select the faces that it touches. But I guess it only selects faces that all of the vertices touch. Yeah, all of these things are going to take some time to internalize and get used to. But like I said, it is worth it because all of these skills that you're learning will apply in Blender when you're ready to do things that are more complicated. And they'll apply to 3D in general. So Tan says, where do I find the element instead of global or local option? It's not listed for me. Oh, you found it. Cool. Yeah, it's right there in the tool settings. But yeah, you have to, if you don't have the cylinder selected, if you don't have a ProBuilder object selected, you won't find those there. You got to have this selected.
But it's like only make a play, but the round one, and the extruded, making like a hole.
So you're saying
a play like a floor. Last time you did a floor. If you can make a round floor and extrude it to become.
oh, could you make take a plane, like a polygon plane, and extrude it up? You could, but chances are one of the things that you'd experience. So here, let's try that. Jesse was asking, like, if I were to start from a plane like this, could I extrude up? And you could, but one thing to note about a plane is if you look at it from the bottom, you don't see anything because a plane only renders the top. And that's something that, for example, if I were to, let's see, let me get to this point. Actually, you can see that my plane is probably more complicated than I need it to be. Let's see, if I set the, but there's a way of patching those things and fixing those up. So you're going to wind up with a lot of questions like, well, wait, how would I do this or do this? Those have all been solved, but be careful not to take on too much complexity while you're learning, because the solution is there, but it's like, oh, like, would I be able to easily select, like, all of the edges all the way around here? You could do something like this, but there's also more complex objects where there's a way of selecting things. Let's see. So I think that if you were just, there's methods to select an edge loop, or I forget what the other thing is called. But there's a lot of cool tools that make 3D editing 3D objects much, much easier that you'll learn along the way. And then, of course, like I can't help but mention for Danny's sake that if you were to go and check out the stairs, that they have some pretty interesting shape controls. So if you look at stairs, you can actually change the steps count, how many steps you want. You can make it twist. Like if you live in Scandinavia, chances are you've come across these stairs somewhere. Scandinavian or Europeans love these. Like I call them like European death stairs. You don't get this much in America, which is why I'm always marveled at how like these stairs are everywhere. And if you're trying to walk, like somebody's coming down on the outside and you're trying to walk up on the inside, the probability you're going to twist your ankle is just like insanely probable. So if you want to create authentic Scandinavian death stairs, then you can using the edit shapes property to do things like increase the circumference, to make them twisty, to adjust the step count, and to change, oh, should these be based on height or count when it comes to number of stairs? You can even set the inner radius if you want something like a pillar on the inside or something. So I really encourage you to check out not just the things that we've looked at, but when you create a new ProBuilder shape, like a torus, for example, click this edit shape and see what kind of interesting things you get. You can control things like the radius here, the number of subdivisions. You don't see that. You'll start to see it get smoother as you turn that up. But I mentioned beware the increase in complexity, and sometimes you might even want something that looks kind of different like that. You can turn off smoothing. Smoothing is a way of making something look curved, even though it's kind of chunky in terms of the geometry. So that's something that you may have noticed with the cylinder. So with this ProBuilder cylinder, if you were to look at the edit shape, Jesse, you might not have seen that smooth thing, but you see, if I check smooth, it doesn't add it doesn't add any more faces, but it makes the shading look different, which means that, all right, just not enormously, yeah. And I'm probably dating myself, but when I was in college, it was actually a skill to be able to make something interesting with the lowest number of polys possible. Whereas now in the video game industry, poly count is no longer that big of a deal, and some of the character models that you might find for video games have millions of polygons. I mean, we used to say like, oh, I can make a cool character in like 100 polygons. That's no longer bragging rights anymore. Nobody's going to be impressed by that. Characters that come out of something like ZBrush will have millions of polygons. So, cool. I am going to take a quick break to use the restroom. For anybody who's here, there's also water. If you need to refresh yourself, run to use the restroom. Then when we come back, we'll look a little bit at vertex, which somebody's already figured out. this is over dinner time, so nobody's getting in trouble for eating in here.
And what is put this in the middle of what is here? Is it close to the surface?
Oh, try selecting vertices instead. Or actually, no, you got it. I think that you just, one of the things that you might want to do, click off to deselect. Exactly. Now area select. I think that you went too low. Try going a little higher. There you go. Now make sure if you.
Yeah,
now,
because you select the layer by layer.
well, I think what happens is that you only have one subdivision here, but that's still fine. What you want to do is hold down Control and select these again, and that will remove those from the selection.
Oh, yeah.
And if you do area select, it should get all of them. So just Control, click, and drag from here to here. Control, and then click and drag.
I think this one works. This one doesn't work.
Oh, well, Control is, no. Control is for selecting, and Alt is for rotating the view.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, those are totally different. Control and Shift behave similar, but Control and
Before I'm also use this, change this only.
Well, like, yeah, one of the things, if as you start to use more different programs, it can actually get really confusing to switch between the different ways of controlling things. That's why, like, for example, Blender, if you start using it, you can set it to have similar controls as Unity or have similar controls as other 3D programs, because it has its own specific shortcuts and such. So let's check and see where we're at. Oh, vertex colors. So I mentioned that it can be really useful for you to be able to add color to a 3D model, especially if you're trying to just indicate something important, like a gameplay element. And there's a method to do that with ProBuilder, which is another way in which it is different from just regular vanilla Unity. So here, when we have, you can have any object that it should have, some different faces. Because vertex coloring, the way we use is we select a face and we apply a color to that face. Now, the tools to add vertex color are under Tools, ProBuilder, Editors, Vertex Color Editor. So if you go all the way from Tools, ProBuilder, Editors, Open Vertex Color Editor. That will give you this pop-out window here. And it behaves just like other windows in Unity in that you can kind of drag it over here and stick it next to, you can actually dock it or attach it here. Or you can have it just kind of floating free, whatever works for you. You can stick it anywhere. Probably the less awkward, the better. And you can move this like this. But now that this editor is here, if I click on a face, so I select it, and then I click Apply, you'll see that it applies that color to that face. So, you can select all the faces and apply a color to all of them. Or you can select individual faces, maybe by holding Control to select multiple. And so, you can essentially kind of, you can do quite a lot in regard to just using ProBuilder to make your 3D objects and to color them. And so this is super, like, for example, when we were doing this, the level design class previously, and we were mocking up a gray box level, and we had ways we wanted to color things. You could, if you wanted to have that ledge that was colored yellow, what we would do is just say, all right, I'm going to create a ProBuilder cube that I move over here. I'm going to switch to the face mode and maybe zoom this out. I'm going to select all the faces make it yellow. And then, I could even exit that edit mode and then switch to scale it to where I want it. So you can, you can jump between using the ordinary Unity tools for move, scale, and rotate if it makes sense, or you can edit at the ProBuilder level where you're actually editing faces, edges, and vertices. Yeah, Benjamin? So if you go to editors, and then you go to vertex color editor. So you'll note that we're not going to go over all of them, but in that ProBuilder UI, there's all these other editors and all these other things that you can do, special ways of selecting things. Actually, that selection thing, I think, is what I was looking for. See, if I go here and I switch to this, if I wanted this entire ring of edges, let me see if I go to ProBuilder, selection, select loop. Yeah. And I selected all the edges on that loop, see? And then that's how I could make, for example, like a circus tent, because I wanted to do this without that. You could also select this edge, let's see. So if I select this edge right here, I'm selecting behind and I don't want to. So if I select that edge there and I do ProBuilder, selection, select ring, I selected all of those edges around there. And now I could even use scale to scale them all together like this. So, so one of the things that you think about when you're 3D modeling is putting geometry where you want it. So if I just want it, if I want to, for example, extrude all these faces all the way around here, let's see if I select all these faces like this, actually, I need to turn on the back face selection like this. So now I have all those faces all the way around selected. Oops, and I deselected them. Let's try to get back to, there we go. So now if I extrude these faces, you'll see that I got what I wanted. I had just those faces, because I added the geometry where I want, now I managed to get this thing extruded, and I can even adjust the distance of the extrusion here. Actually, that looks terrible. So if I do extrude faces and set this to 5, that's still quite a lot. Let's try 1. Let's try 0.2. So you can see as I experiment with this, you essentially, if you want to build out things, you might need to add faces, add geometry to the place where you want to do that work. If I wouldn't be able to create this lip around here like this. Let's say I'm creating a lighthouse, and I wanted this kind of walkway that the player can walk out on. I would need to have added that extra geometry here. If I didn't have that there, I wouldn't be able to do that. So making sure that you know how to add geometry in the places you need to use it. For example, let's say that I want to have, I could extrude this part out to make a walkway. I go to element and then switch to move. I'm going to make a walkway from this building to another identical one over here. So I was able to extrude out this part, so it gave me the extra geometry to do this. Whereas if I hadn't extruded it and I tried to do this, that's not at all what I want. So playing around with extruding faces, being able to select the elements that you want to, beveling. Here's another interesting thing. Let's say you want to create a window. If I select one of these faces and I right click and do subdivide faces, let's see. So what that did was that created 4 here. That's not real. I think I wanted to inset actually. Although you see what happens when you subdivide a face. I went from this one face to 4 smaller ones. And you could keep subdividing, subdivide that, and I get 4 there. You know, subdivide this, and I get 4 more there. But I think that the thing that I was trying to do was inset faces. Oh, am I pushing right? There we go. So if I do, triangulate? No. I guess technically what I could do is I could, no.
Can I give it a number? How many faces around this?
That's kind of what I was trying to do.
You can give it a number to subdivide.
Ah, oh yeah. Let's see that. So if I wrote it, if I use subdivide faces, and let's see, was there a tool setting that you saw there? So yeah, I don't think that I'm seeing the,
6 divided by 6.
yeah. Yeah, I didn't see a setting to do that. Although there's almost always, like, just like in most things with a computer, there's usually 3 or 4 different ways to accomplish the same thing. So there's a good chance that you'll come across something like that. So let's see. So we talked about vertex colors, and so like give that a shot. Try vertex if you haven't already. Try to apply vertex colors to something you're making and see if you can create something interesting and colorful. Mm-hmm. So if you want to do vertex colors, you'll need to go to the Tools menu and click ProBuilder Editors, the top one, and then open Vertex Color Editor. Now you can take that and you can drag it over here. Drag it from this thing, and then snap it to like over here. That works too. Probably easier if you drag it from there to here. Yeah, put it right here. Perfect. And so now what you do is you click on that thing, which gives you access to be able to click on a face. And then if you click on one of your faces on your stairs, now try clicking a color like pink. Now if you click off so it's not selected anymore, now you can see it. So if you rotate around your object, so any face, so vertex coloring works on faces. So you can select any faces and apply that vertex color. And you might have noticed that your vertex color palette comes with all these different colors. But you can also define your own colors. Like if you have a color that you don't see here, you could actually click on this eyedropper and select it from your scene, select it from the editor, select it from anything. You could also just click the color here and get a color picker. So you can create your own color palette of commonly used colors. And you can even define those and save those separately if you wanted to. So that's like a power user thing. if you found yourselves really only using the same colors, maybe you want a minimum number of these things. Maybe you want to stick this down here and you only use 3 colors. Totally viable thing to do there. All right. So then we're gonna go on to the next thing, which we're going to talk about materials and textures a bit. So you know, materials and textures. In order to apply, you know, a material or a texture to a 3D object, you have to think about it. A texture is a 2D thing. It's like wrapping paper. You know, if you've ever wrapped a present, you're taking a piece of paper that's flat and you're wrapping it around a 3D object. And so in order for that to work and for things to appear in the place that you want them, there's something called a UV map. So for example, you can see here, there's this, like you can imagine like a 6-sided die, like this cube here. If you were to unwrap it so that it's flat, you would get a pattern like this. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, if you went with something much more complicated, like this, this character model of a pixie, in order to unwrap the surface of the 3D model so that it's flat, you wind up with something that looks like this. And the points here are called UVs. And you're like, well, why did they come up with that? Well, you know, when you're talking about, oftentimes you talk about like something being on XY plane. Oh, a coordinate system that says, okay, if you do 2 units on X and 1 unit up in Y, that's where the point is. And that's how you can map something. UVs said, well, X and Y is already taken for everything else. We'll say U and V. So that U and V is like just the coordinates of where something is on this thing. So that's something that, you know, you can see that there's a checker pattern here. That's something that 3D artists use to check to see if their UVs are actually working well. Because if you have your UVs positioned in the correct spaces, the checker pattern will look mostly like square checkers. But if you look on the sides of the model, like down the side where their hips are, like right here, you can see some stretching. And that's where the UVs, if you get UV stretching, then the texture won't look really correct. And so getting something to look correct it can be a challenge with 3D modeling, and that's where UVs come in. Now, there are, you know, I mentioned that like with character modeling, now there's new tools like ZBrush that are much more like working with clay. Now there's also tools that allow you to paint directly on a 3D model and completely ignore having to deal with this. This is almost an old thing that you'll still come across, but that is something that is still worth understanding. So what we're going to do is we're going to download some textures so that we can apply them to our 3D model and then see how they look. And so what we want to do is we want to go onto the Unity Asset Store, filter for free, and find any kind of texture that appeals to you. So I'll walk through this with you as well. Let's see. So if I go to the Unity Asset Store, you know, the thing to do first is to make sure that you're logged in, because if you're not, you'll find something, you'll have to go through the whole login process. So double check that you're logged in, and then search for like free textures. So for example, you know, if you set the price to free, you'll see there are actually a ton of free 3D textures. A lot of them, a lot of times you're getting like, you know, common surfaces. If you want something really exotic, you know, here's some stylized textures, low poly stylized textures. I think these are the ones I've used previously. That's why it says purchased for me. So basically find something that you are interested in, open it up, and click Add to My Assets. I really encourage you to go onto the Unity Asset Store and look for the free stuff that you can import. So if you click Add to My Assets and you accept the terms of service, what's probably going to happen is that it's going to open up you'll see it here. It's added to your assets, but it's not yet in Unity. You can almost think of it as being, something in your shopping cart, or not shopping cart, but you're going to soon have a collection of tons of assets. But if you click Open in Unity, it'll open it up in the package manager. And you can see here it is, textures free, or whatever you picked. If you click Download, it'll take a second to download, not nearly as long as setting up a Unity project. This time you will get that window that tells you to confirm what's being imported into your project. Eventually. Or maybe I won't. Maybe it just let's see. Did I add it to my, so if you've got it, let's see. That's, so it didn't actually add it to my project. I didn't, oh, there it is. So the download button changed to import. Now I'm seeing what I expected to see. And now these are all the things that are going to be added to my project if I click import. Totally normal. And when it is added to your project, you should find it in the project folder here. So if I close this, now I see that I have under assets, textures part 1, and I have materials, and I have textures. The textures are the 2D images. A material, you can't just apply a texture directly to a 3D object. You have to first make a material out of it. So this is already created materials. It looks like, let's see if this, I think that what I have is I have some textures from a different render pipeline, and that's why these all show up as pink. But I actually think that there's a way to fix this. I think that, did you get the same thing? Yeah. So I think that if we go to rendering, render pipeline converter, let's see. This is actually a super useful thing to know because there's a lot of these outdated assets or assets that, so if what you want to do is you want to go to Window, Rendering, and then Render Pipeline Converter. And what you want is, it's probably default set to built into URP, which I think is what we got. And so you can go ahead and do initialize and convert. It'll ask you to save the scene maybe. So I'm just going to call this scene test. If you're not already with a existing scene that has already been saved. So let's see. I might need to actually select all these things. Material upgrade is really what we need. Initialize and convert. Aha. So now, you may not have gone through this. You may have downloaded materials that were already set up for URP. We have a URP project, and that is the rendering pipeline, Universal Render Pipeline. You might have downloaded assets for HDRP. You might have downloaded assets for built-in render pipeline. So this is a very common thing that you might have to do to get textures to look correct. If you wind up with those fuchsia pink colored textures, I'll go through that again. You go to Window, Rendering, Render Pipeline Converter, and click Material Upgrade, Initialize and Convert. And so now you should have some materials that you can work with. Let's see, Jesse, did you, so did you download some, so you have starter assets, let's see. So, well, that's first person control. Did you download some, I think you might not have wound up finishing the, let's see. So if we went to here, So realistic textures. So you downloaded them, but you didn't import them.
Oh.
So click
yes.
import. Yeah. No. I mean, you might have seen I did the exact same thing. I thought you got to download them, but then you also have to import them. So now you get this window exactly. You click import. See, I mean, you know, when you've been using Unity as long as I have, then you'll wind up with like just under my assets, you're going to have like just tons and tons of assets. You know, if I were to look at, you know, I've got like 87 assets and tons of crazy stuff. Lots of fun. You know, some things are useful. Insectoid crab monster, that was fun. Mimic prototype. You know, there's some of these things that if you want to create a roguelike card game, this is a free tool that will kind of give you a starting point for doing that. Some of these things are paid, some of them are free. One of my favorites that I've been using now is Dialogue System for Unity that lets you create essentially narrative in Unity. It's the same tool that was used by Disco Elysium and Citizen Sleeper and a bunch of other games. You can get it on sale for like 50 euros, but it's totally worth the money if you're really into making narrative games or games with strong narrative. So now you have, or should have something close to these some materials to work with. Hey, nice pencil, Danny. So what you want to do now that we have some materials is create a ProBuilder. I recommend a cube to keep it easy. And what you do is you can just take and drag a texture. Actually, you can't drag a texture onto a ProBuilder cube, but I think that you might. Let's see. That was weird how it just like disappeared. So yeah, there it is. Now it's working. You can drag a texture onto a ProBuilder cube. I don't know what happened to that one. Oh, there it went. All right, so now you can see I have a brick texture. And it looks all right. The default UVs, you know, are seem to be correct. Like these corners, it looks like they work fairly well. Well, it's a little awkward on the top, but that's fine. But let's take a look at that. So, you know, as I showed you in that presentation, you can actually look at the UVs using one of one of the ProBuilder tools. If you go to Tools, ProBuilder, Editors, Open UV Editor. Now, this is where it can be really helpful if you have a second monitor, because you know, otherwise this is going to take up a little bit of space. So, for example, maybe I could dock it over here. So I don't technically need my inspector actually at this point. So let's see. And all of a sudden I've got this window's like humongous. How do I get this to, there we go. All right. So if I, you know, what you see right here now is just like one of these things, but if we switch over to a face selection mode and we select one of the faces, you can see that like the way that the UVs here are set up is all of these faces kind of sit on top of each other. But you could pull them off. If I click, okay, the UV on the top, that's this one. The UV on this side is this one. And I won't go too much into depth here, but just so that you know, if you wanted to learn about adjusting UVs, for example, there's some interesting things you can do. Let's see. I think that you can. Yeah. So for example, if I wanted things to line up differently here, I could select a face and I could click this thing that is lock the scene view handles to the UV manipulation mode, and then I'm dragging the UV itself. So you can see how changing the UV coordinates changes the way that the texture looks on the 3D model. So if you really wanted something to line up correctly, like if I'm looking at this corner here and I'm like, this, to me, oh, this is driving me nuts. This doesn't line up with this. You could literally get them to line up. So UVs can be a pretty complicated subject, so I'm not going to really go into this much in depth at all. But just know that you have these tools in ProBuilder to adjust UVs, and that if you wind up with an object that has seams that you don't like, that you can go in and fix these things. You know, if you want these to line up in different ways, okay, I want this to be more like just right there, and this to be here. And of course, you know, when you're lining up bricks, like that's awfully like, you know, nitpicky, but like there's going to be other things that you might want textures of on there that would actually matter. I mean, you know, it probably matters a lot less if you have like grass or whatnot. But you know, here, this is another cool thing I just did, which is I selected a face and I dragged a texture onto that specific face. So now I've got brick over here and concrete over here and grass over there. So other fun things to do with UVs and with materials and textures. Cool. So let's go back to the presentation. Let's see, which is here. So we learned that you can go onto the Unity Asset Store and get free textures. There's free 3D models, there's free scenes, there's free characters. There's all kinds of free stuff that you can get from the Unity Asset Store, and because it goes directly into the package manager, it's really easy to get that into your game. So go ahead and explore some of the free things available on the Unity Asset Store. It's a great way to play around with different things and learn how they work. And because it's free, if it ever doesn't work or it's problematic, then just like delete it. You know, one of the things we learned is how, when you get the materials in, you might need to update them, like we showed you with the render pipeline converter. You can use these adjustable sliders so that you can see a nice preview of them. You know, you might wind up adjusting things like the tiling. Oh, this is something that I could probably show you that's useful. Like if I were to just say, like what if we were looking at the brick on this object? And let me leave the, oh, it's because I'm in the UV editor. Let me close this. It's still doing the UV editor thing. Let me do Tools, ProBuilder, Editors, UV Editor. Now I want to turn off this mode. There we go. And now I'm gonna turn this off. So like, you know, one of the things that that is very common when dealing with a texture. So look, I've got this brick texture, the brick material rather, and it's on here. But let's say that this thing's really a small thing and it's got a lot of bricks on it, and I don't like that so much. If you can actually adjust the properties of this material to change how the tiling on this works so they'll be bigger or smaller. So for example, if I have, I have my object selected, and then I click on the material. If I were to change the tiling under surface inputs to be like 5 by 5, well, those got a whole lot smaller. What if I go the opposite direction? What if I go 0.1 by 0.1? All right, that seems like I'm probably looking more like 0.5 by 0.5. So you see I've changed the scale of the texture, and it makes it look differently in terms of the scale. Now note, you're changing the texture itself, so any other object that uses the same texture is going to have the same effect. So if you want the same texture on two different things at two different scales, then you would want to duplicate the texture, which you can like Control D to do so. And then you might have like bricks small and bricks large to adjust the tiling. So tiling here offset can also move things, but you can see the difference here between like tiling of 1 and tiling of like 0.5. So tiling affects how much the scale of the texture you have on something. We talked about UVs. Now, you saw that the UVs of a cube are pretty simple, but like I've got this torus here, or not a torus, it's a pipe, and the UVs are much more complicated. They also tend to sit on top of each other and you kind of have to adjust them. So let's see, we have about 15 minutes left. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little presentation and let you use the remainder of the time to experiment and ask me any questions you have along the way. But let's go ahead and go through the rest of the presentation. Like one of the things that a lot of 3D artists use is taking actual pictures that they use for reference and putting it into the editor so that you can model and almost trace as you move the 3D object vertices and edges and stuff around. Very common technique that's used, and you can sometimes either draw the character yourself in 2D and then bring it in to model it, or you might find blueprints for like a car or something. And this is a really useful tool for 3D modeling. You can switch in, you can essentially bring the images in, put the image on a plane, position them in places so that you can line these things up so you're looking straight down one axis or straight down the other. So you can see how this character is lined up, or how this plane is lined up. So very common and useful technique.
So it means I can sketch first and then import that makes that's all.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really, you know, so difficult.
So no. Yeah, so if you want to draw your own character or draw your own 3D object first from a 2D view, bringing those things in, essentially what you wind up doing is you wind up taking, like look at these I'm going to use a texture like brick, but let's just say that if I were to create a, technically it doesn't need to be a ProBuilder plane, but you can imagine this is a picture of something. And I can say, okay, I'm going to put it where it is. Let's see. That should be more like -90. All right, so now in my scene, you can imagine this is a picture of my character. I can scoot it back, put it wherever I want to. And then if I have like a cube that I'm starting with, then when I look down and go into isometric view, it becomes easier for me to move the points to where I want to and extrude and do the things I want to essentially line up. And that's the smart, like most 3D modelers are not going to just look on a piece of paper and create it in the editor. They're going to do something like this. They're going to use a reference and trace the 3D object. And that's the most common way of doing something, creating 3D models, is doing something like that. It's much, much easier. So one of the things I want you to do is to explore using ProBuilder to create things. So look at this isometric city down here. This entire thing in this bottom part of this picture, this was entirely created in ProBuilder. So you can gray box things, but you can also create fully functional art for if you want a simple kind of isometric look for a game, that would be really easy to do. So the homework that I'm going to suggest with the challenge, not homework, challenge, use ProBuilder to create a gray box level or improve on what you did for the previous class. So Danny, you might want to try to recreate the prison, I believe it was a prison, right? That you were cooking up. Maybe these tools in ProBuilder will make it easier for you to do what you're envisioning. It's a good idea to think about finding reference for the things that you want to build. You could bring that reference in as I showed you, or just having it nearby, depending on how complex you're talking about. Use vertex colors to give significance to gameplay-related objects, or maybe just for aesthetics, kind of like this simple city down here. And you can even add a first-person or third-person controller. In the first class, we added a third-person controller, the robot. In the second class, we added a first-person controller. But either way, you can test out what it would be like to play through your level or your creation using that. So, and that's a great way to get a sense for it. Remember to do things like create a scale reference for a player, so that you might remember one of the things that I taught you to do when we were just starting out was to create a 3D object, a cube that's actually scale of 2 in the y and then 1 in x and z, because that's roughly the scale of a person, a character. So, and then you can get a sense for how big something should be based on like, well, this is how big a player is. 1 by 1 by 2. Because if you don't, then you might wind up discovering that you built something way too big or way too small. And then you are scaling it, and it becomes a giant pain in the butt. So yeah, I think that's it. Oh, and then as a little bit of inspiration, I wanted to talk about working as a solo developer. I mean, you're already video game developers, you know, even when you're working by yourself, you can consider yourself a solo dev. And there's a lot of games that have been made by solo developers. All of these games were made by a single person. They might have gotten some help to polish the game along the way, but Stardew Valley, you know, Eric, what was his last name? I'm going to butcher it now, but I'm not going to say it. So Eric Barone made Stardew Valley. Inscription was done, you know, by one person. Return of the Obra Dinn, Balatro. All of these games, super successful, made by one person. You know, here at Game Habitat, there's a lot of support for game developers. And you know, and also there's people who come by. That's kind of a weird slide. I don't even know why that's in there, man. So, yeah, I think maybe that was something that made sense like last year when I put this thing together. But basically, like, you know, you should consider that you're already on the path to making cool stuff. And this is something that, like, I think it really makes a good hobby. You know, for example, the guy, Locothunk, who made Balatro, was just building games as a hobby in his spare time because he loved doing it. And then when he made Balatro, he was like, wow, this seems to be really interesting. And had some friends play it, and they got super excited about it. He kept developing it, and eventually it got, you know, it grew so much that he got a publisher. He's currently working on like improvements to it, but taking his time. But it's also wonderful to get together with other people. Like, I really encourage you to try out game jams, where you get together with other people and build a game over the course of the weekend. Wonderful way to sharpen your skills. And actually, at this point, something that I would recommend is that there's a game jam in January called Global Game Jam. And it happens at places all over the world. And there's places where you can go to participate. You can also participate online. But it's feasible that, like, okay, it's late October, you know, with the next couple months of developing your skills, you could consider participating in Global Game Jam as your first game jam. And it's not about creating something impressive. It's about just creating something at all. You're a success if you have something that functions like a game at the end of the jam. Most jams are like 48 hours. They start on a Friday night, they end on a Sunday afternoon. So I can't recommend enough. Like beginners are always welcome. It's a great way to like just get inspired, work with other people, enter by yourself. And in fact, let's see, if you go to itch.io, there is a calendar of game jams, and at any given point, there are dozens and dozens of game jams happening. You know, this is a calendar. And they're on all kinds of subjects. You know, I think that, you know, if you get to January, you'll eventually see Global Game Jam. But the point is, whether it's on the internet or in person, there's always, you know, something cool that you could be participating in to develop your skills, to meet cool people, to make something fun to add to your portfolio. And if you think about it in terms of just something that you love doing because it's a creative outlet, I think that you'll eventually, find a lot of rewarding experiences through it. Cool. Well, there's 7 minutes left, so if anybody has any questions that they want to either post in the chat or raise your hand here in the classroom, I'll be glad to help out. Yeah.
After you import this material,
So you
it has arrows.
Oh, well, you don't need this anymore. You see, this is only used for those materials that come out as fuchsia. It looks like you do have, there's a couple of weird ones.
Yeah.
But I think that like edge picker, those seem kind of strange to me. So I'm not even sure that those are what this is actually. I can see what it is. It's using a special shader that you don't have. Shaders are different ways of making things look. So you see this says ProBuilder 6 standard variant shader. Whereas this says hidden face picker. I think these are actually, so for one, you're because you're looking at all materials, you're seeing some strange materials. And these are things that are, I see, this is probably used by some of the ProBuilder tools up here. So the things that you just downloaded are actually here. And so if you want to look at those materials, that's the things that you just downloaded.
Okay,
So no, it's okay. So what Jesse discovered was that you can actually over here in project you can click all materials and you'll see all materials that are in your project. But sometimes you might find some weird stuff that you didn't even realize was in there, like these things, which are ProBuilder specific textures that you're not going to be able to fix this pinkness because they're not actually there. I'll be right there, Martin. All right, so what you do is you go to, go to Tools, ProBuilder Selection, select Loop. There you go. And the other one is Ring. If you select like one of these and you want to get all the ribs around. So those are useful. Yeah, those should work too. Maybe it's because there was a menu that opened up that seemed like it needed more information. So when you did that, if you click it again, so now you see select edge ring. So maybe that's probably the reason why it wasn't working out. Hey, Martin. Yes, you're trying to do the conversion thing. So let's see. So you have some materials that, did you download some materials?
Because the PS3, I haven't dared to.
So yeah, I think that, here, we'll just close that to get it out of your way. So you would need to, let's see. Well, let's see. Here's your My Assets. So it looks like you haven't refresh error. Packet. So what do we have there? Package name. Error while getting auth code. That's weird. So it looks like you had some kind of an error when you were trying to import things. Although it didn't show up in, let's see if we can refresh this. Yeah, that's weird. It might be that, let's see, if you go to the Unity Asset Store Web. So I would say try to go to the, let's see. Unity Assets Store. All right, so then, so make sure you sign in. That might have been some part of the problem is that, so now you're signed in. So now if you were to look for, like if you type in textures, there you go. And then what we want to do is we make sure to set the filter for free. And then you find something that you like. Okay, these are pretty interesting. There it goes. There it goes. Okay. So let's see, what we'll do is we'll add to my assets and accept the EULA. And then when it does, then it'll say open in Unity. And then you can tell it to okay. Did that work? Oh, it needs to be up now. Uh-huh. Oh, so let me see. You've got a strange error happening here. What I think this might be is that you would want to close and open Unity again.
Yeah, okay.
So that's probably what's going. So that's the most common way to address computer problems. Have you tried turning it off, turning it on again? All right. Well, I would first just shut down the Unity editor entirely and open it back up, because that will help reset a lot of things. You're going to save your work and etc. So yeah. All right. Well, everybody on the stream, thanks for joining. I'm going to go ahead and shut down the stream. And then I'll, of course, make the stream available if anybody wants to review it.